Looking into 2022, a bunny girl senpai, Moltres, and Virgil from Devil May Cry.
Now I'm a little motivated.
There's a lot of new servants to look forward to in the coming year. And in this video, we'll be focusing on the most useful units for either boss fights or farming purposes. Thanks to xNaya for a lot of the footage of servants I either didn't have or didn't have time to film. We'll also be including units featured on rerun banners to account for both new players and those who simply missed them the first time around. If you like what you see here, feel free to subscribe. And with that, let's get on with the top 10 servants of 2022. Starting off with number 10, we have Sima Yi, aka Reines. Reines is the latest support to rival Waver, providing a total 50% NP charge for one ally, a targetable 40% attack buff, a 2-hit invincibility, as well as a few other buffs. Reines can serve as a solid support for both farming teams and boss fight teams alike, providing separate NP batteries to keep your main DPS farmer topped up on NP charge, as well as an invincibility with a modest debuff resistance to keep your main DPS in the fight for longer boss fights. Reines' NP can be used to support a team of Berserkers, as it nullifies class disadvantage for your whole party. Now, the main downsides to Reines include lowering her own attack stat by 20% when buffing an ally's attack stat, as well as her simply being a Rider class servant, which causes her to absorb more critical stars, giving your main DPS a lower chance to land a critical attack in most instances. If you're dead set on Reines, she'll be getting her banner during the 13th Interlude campaign around late June of 2022. Keep in mind, Castoria is most likely going to be on the next banner after Reines, given our anniversary starts around early July, so remember to watch your sync courts. And for number 9, it's none other than himself, Romulus-Quirinus. Romulus is the true embodiment of Rome, granting his party attack buffs, crit damage buffs, and extra crit damage buffs to his Roman allies, while also turning the enemy team into Roman-traded enemies. The rest of his kit includes an invincibility, an NP charge with the Star Bomb, a Buster and crit star absorption buff, and gives him the ability to stack extra roaming trait debuffs on the enemy when he lands a critical attack. With these skills, Romulus can deal respectable damage with his multiple buffs. However, Romulus's NP, which is an AoE buster attack, shines best after having stacked multiple stacks of Roman traits on the enemy team, which can take some time to ramp up if you aren't soloing with Romulus. Romulus can be difficult to use within a team since a lot of his damage depends on him landing multiple Roman trait debuffs with his own attacks. With that in mind, Romulus can make a decent soloer for shorter boss fights. With his 20% attack buff, total 50% crit damage buff for himself, a 30% buster buff, and a 2-hit invincibility with the Star Bomb, Romulus can hit pretty hard while he's on the field. If you want to summon, then he'll be available during the second Olympus summoning campaign around mid-April of 2022. Moving on to number 8, it's the artist turned sunflower lolly, Vincent Van Gogh. Van Gogh is a unique servant who specializes in crit damage and stacking curse debuffs on themselves. Her skills include a Guts, 3 stacks of curse debuffs on themselves, an NP battery that charges by 10% per curse stack, a defense and quick resist down for the enemy party, and a whole bunch of other buffs. Van Gogh can actually work in a double Van Gogh setup, as her NP not only increases the crit damage and attack of her allies, but also further increases the crit damage of allies with the existence outside of the domain passive by 100%, which Van Gogh herself has. Van Gogh fills an interesting crit damage niche that can continuously feed itself crit buffs without having to worry too much about damage even when their skills are on cooldown, as NP refund from landing critical attacks, as well as their curse-based NP batteries, can keep them going for a while. As for survivability, Van Gogh can actually last a little while, as their party-wide one-hit evade skill, along with their Guts, Heal, and passive skill that prevents them from dying to curse damage, can keep them in the fight longer than it may seem at first. If you want to see what Van Gogh's capable of yourself, she'll be getting a raid up during the Imaginary Scramble event around mid-November of 2022. Next on our list, in 7th place, we have Ashiya Douman. Ashiya Douman is an interesting servant who acts as both a solid DPS and support unit, whose kit includes a plethora of debuffs for the enemy, a whopping 80% NP battery for himself, attack and crit buffs for evil and chaotic allies, and a gut skill that activates twice over 5 turns, meaning Ashiya Douman has to die 3 times to be killed, because of course, people die when they are killed. When using Ashiya Douman, he can function well in both boss fights and farming runs, or you could always just use him as ammo for Chen Gong, if you're into the cursed 3-turn farming strategies, that is. Ashiya Douman is a very unique servant having the ability to stack massive curse damage on all enemies while providing multiple damage buffs for his evil and chaotic allies, and do it all with some pretty catchy foot stomps. If you've got Doman on your mind, he'll be available during the Himiko release campaign around early December next year. If you miss him then, he'll have another raid up during the Summer 6 event around late September of 2023. Moving on, in 6th place we have one of the best loopers to date, Musashi Berserker. Musashi Berserker is an interesting servant who has the ability to demolish nearly any free quest or boss fight, provided she has the right supports. Musashi Berserker's skills include a 1-hit evade tied to a crit buff, an NP gain buff that also doubles the hit counts of your regular arts cards, and a skill that sacrifices 5,000 HP for a whole bunch of other buffs. When using Musashi Berserker as a farmer, with double Castoria, she can farm through nearly any enemy wave without having any craft essence or specific mystic code equipped. An exception to this includes Assassin Waves, where she'll be needing a Tropical Summer Mystic Code with no craft essence needed. And for Berserker Waves, while there's a number of ways to support her, she can use either a non-MLB K-Scope or MLB Art of the Poisonous Snakes to eat with no Mystic Code needed. If you want to use Musashi Berserker to farm Berserker Waves without having to use a craft essence, then your options are either an NP1 Musashi Berserker with double Castoria and a plug-suited Paracelsus, or an NP2 Musashi Berserker with double Castoria and a plug-suited Tamamo. While Musashi Berserker isn't as versatile when it comes to farming certain waves, she is still one of the most consistent farmers when it comes to high, reliable damage and farming speed. As for Musashi Berserker's boss fight capabilities, Musashi Berserker, despite her fragility, can tear through boss fight enemies easily with her 3-turn invincibility pierce, as well as quickly charge up her own NP with her regular arts cards with her double arts hit count skill. Musashi Berserker with the right supports can stick around for a while thanks to her 1-hit evade and her 3-turn gut skill. Now, Musashi Berserker is one of many capable arts farmers. Here's a quick breakdown of the average damage numbers, farming times, and requirements of the top-tier universal farmers out there. If you're deciding between Space Ishtar or Musashi Berserker, when it comes to farming, Space Ishtar has slightly higher overall damage and is more versatile, while Musashi Berserker has a faster average farming time, which can come in handy for lotto farming. If Musashi Berserker is a must-have for you, she'll be getting her last raid up to date during the Summer 4 rerun event around mid-June of 2022. And finally, starting off our top 5, we have Princess Himiko. Himiko brings a lot to the table, from a 50% NP battery that increases her own buster crit strength and star absorb, to a 3-turn buster buff with an invincibility for herself, an NP that further buffs all allies' buster cards and crit strength, and a skill that buffs the party's attack as well as grant up to 24 stars per turn for 3 turns. As a flex DPS support unit, Himiko's attack and star generating buffs from her first skill, as well as the buster and crit damage buffs from her NP, can greatly improve any team's buster and crit damage, while Himiko's other skills can turn herself into a beast of a DPS when her buster cards are on the field. As for stalling, Himiko plus double Castoria is by far one of the most disgusting stall comps out there, due to Himiko's NP also increasing the NP overcharge of all allies by 2 stages. When using Castoria's NP after Himiko's NP, Castoria can give the whole team 4 hits of unpierceable invincibility for 3 turns, giving plenty of time to charge the NPs up again. Himiko also has a personal 1-turn invincibility tied to her second skill, in case she ever gets focused by an enemy. And finally, for Buster Crit memes, a double Himiko setup can generate up to 48 stars per turn for 3 turns, meaning it is literally possible to 3-turn farm using crits instead of NPs, albeit probably not the most reliable farming tactic due to card RNG. While there are many servants out there with star generating, crit buffing, and buster buffing skills, few come close to the overall output Himiko provides. From generous, ridiculous amounts of stars for crit memes to an NP that enables one of the easiest stalling tactics out there, Himiko is one of the top tier servants to roll for in 2022. If you've got your heart set on Himiko, she'll be summonable during the Guda 5 event around mid-October of 2022, as well as during the Guda 5 rerun event around early November of 2023. And for the 4th top servant of 2022, it's Kama Assassin. As a single target assassin who can also deal double damage to alter ego enemies, Kama fills a role as a very specialized boss fight servant. Her skills include an NP overcharge buff by 1 stage with a personal heal at the cost of a targeted max HP demerit, an attack buff tied to a guts that never expires, and a 50% NP battery that comes with a 3-turn class affinity advantage against alter ego enemies with a crit and charm resist down buff. Kama, as a boss fight servant, can deal some massive damage while even providing some stall potential with her chance-based charm ability from her NP, as well as survive for longer fights with her sizable 4,000 heal on a 5-turn cooldown and a guts that never expires. Kama is nearly unrivaled when it comes to single target damage, NP charge, and survivability, and until the Pretender class comes out in 2 years, she's the only servant capable of having true class advantage against alter egos, not to mention her various ascensions for the cultured folks out there. If Kama has charmed your Sane Courts, then she'll be getting her last raid up to date during the Tokugawa Oku event rerun around mid-July next year. And now, starting off our top 3, in 3rd place we have Vlad III. Vlad has gotten quite a few buffs since his release. His skills include an NP drain that also gives an NP charge, a defense and attack buff, and a double guts that's tied to an NP gain buff. Vlad has gone from a below average berserker to one of the best single target loopers in FGO, thanks to his own buffs and the introduction of Castoria. With the right supports, Vlad can tear through boss fights and potentially refund a full 100% NP charge with his whopping 10-hit Noble Phantasm that also drops 20 crit stars after use. And later on, around mid-April of 2023, his NP will get a second buff that increases the damage and adds an arts resist down effect. Despite Vlad's Berserker class, he can stay in the fight for a while with his 30% defense buff as well as his Guts skill that grants him a one-time Guts for 1 turn, on top of a second Guts that lasts for 5 turns, giving him great survivability against challenging boss fights. If you plan on going for Vlad, he'll be getting a few different raid ups, with the first one starting around March of 2022, a second one around April of 2023, and a third one around October of 2023. He'll also be able to get him with the SSR ticket coming with the 20 million downloads campaign around April of 2022, or with the 6th anniversary campaign around July of 2023. Coming up on the second top servant of 2022, we have the legendary Merlin. Merlin has been in the game for 3 years now, has never had a buff, and is still one of the top tier supports to appear in FGO, being able to assist in boss fights, stall teams, and even certain farming teams. His kit includes a party-wide attack buff with NP charge, a massive buster and crit buff skill, with a max HP buff, and an invincibility, along with a few other buffs. When it comes to boss fights or stall teams, Merlin can go a long way, with one of his skills giving the whole team a 1-turn invincibility, and with his Noble Phantasm giving a continuous heal, crit star regen, and NP gauge buff that lasts for 5 turns. It is important to note, while we do get 2 more meta-defining buster supports in the next 2 years, Merlin still provides the greatest survivability and remains as a top-tier support for at least the next 2 years to come. If you don't have Merlin yet, he will be getting his last raid up to date during the Summer 4 rerun event around mid-June of 2022. And finally, for the top servant of 2022, we have Artoria Caster, aka Castoria. Castoria's debut was one that took the community by storm, inspiring team compositions never before thought possible, as well as a few fresh memes. Safe to say, Castoria has been a game changer for both casual fans and FGO esports alike. Starting with Castoria's abilities, her first skill provides a party-wide attack buff along with a whopping 30% NP charge for the whole team. Her second skill grants one ally 20% NP charge and a 30% NP gain buff for the whole party. And finally, her third skill grants a 50% arts buff along with a 50% attack buff against threat to humanity enemies for 3 turns and a 1-turn invincibility. Castoria's Noble Phantasm, around Caliburn, provides a 3-turn attack buff, a debuff cleanse, and an unpierceable invincibility for the whole party. This is the only form of invincibility that cannot be pierced. However, it can still be removed by buff removal skills. Whether it's for farming teams, boss fights, or stall teams, Castoria is one of the most versatile and meta-defining servants to come to FGO. Castoria will be summonable during our 5th anniversary campaign, which will be around early July of 2022. She'll also be getting another raid up around late June of 2023 during the Lost World 6 release campaign. And finally, since there were so many servants competing for the top 10, we have a few honorable mentions, among them being Gogh, best servant YouTuber, as well as Tamamo Namai and Asclepius. Despite the memes of Tamamo's death since the debut, oh my god, I can't see this. Despite the memes of Tamamo's death since the debut of Castoria, Tamamo actually serves an even greater role as an extra support to Castoria for longer fights. Tamamo can provide heals, skill cooldown reduction, and of course, even more NP charge from her own NP. And as for Asclepius, he is able to cast an NP seal, provide massive heals, NP charge, and NP gain buffs, as well as keep your party cleansed from debuffs, along with a few other skills. Both Asclepius and Tamamo will be on raid up around February and January of 2022, although Tamamo will be available also with the SSR ticket around April of 2022. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, and if you want to see me live when I do my GSSR rolls or the NP5 Millzine rolls I'm doing right after this video releases, I'll be over on twitch.tv/PocketChalk. I wish you all the best of luck, whoever you're going for in the new year, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Laters!